Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so pleased that you're joining us for this terribly important conversation on voting as we approach one of the most consequential elections of our lifetimes. You've heard it before, but from any objective perspective, November 3rd is of extraordinary consequence to our country and to the world. Any of you who watched the debate last night will distinctly understand exactly what's at risk as we hopefully move forward to a more compassionate, more calm, and more equitable America. I'm so pleased to be joined by my good friend and an extraordinary Secretary of State for the state of Minnesota, Steve Simon, and so glad that you're joining us, Mr. Secretary, to ensure that your voice is heard as we approach this election season. You know, one of the reasons I decided to run for office is I believe in democracy, and its ability to resolve our differences peacefully and find ways to move forward together. And that's why I've made it my mission to improve democracy in any way I can, starting with one of the very first bills that we passed in the House of Representatives in 116th Congress, H.R. 1, the For the People Act, which is a broad democracy reform bill. That's why we started with it, H.R. 1. It's H.R. 1 for a reason. It passed overwhelmingly in the House, but unfortunately has not seen even a vote in the Senate, in Mitch McConnell's Senate. But had it been signed into law, and when it ultimately is signed into law, it'll help ensure that every state in the nation is better prepared for challenges that we're facing right now, in this case because of COVID, to ensure that people can vote safely and securely, particularly during a pandemic, and ensure that states have systems to allow for online voter registration, require states to allow eligible voters to register on the same day they vote, and expand early voting, among so many other important reforms that would ensure flexibility, especially during times like these. In addition to H.R. 1, I co-sponsored and voted for H.R. 4, which is the Voting Rights Advancement Act, which would restore protections against states violating the voting rights of eligible citizens all around the country. I'm also proud to have introduced the Voter Notice Act, which would have required states to inform voters of any changes to process made this year in response to COVID-19, especially with so much misinformation and disinformation spreading online. You know, democracy works best when everyone can be heard. Nobody objects to what I just said. Democracy works best when everybody can be heard. It's a core principle of democracy. And that's why I'm pushing so hard for these reforms and why I'm so disappointed that Mitch McConnell in the Senate won't even bring them to the floor for a vote. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, democracies all around the world, including right here at home, are facing challenges that many of us have never seen before and could barely have anticipated or imagined. But it's not the first time we're going to have an election during a time of challenge. It's not even the first time we're going to have an election during a pandemic, of course. But we're resilient and we're committed to practicing our democratic tradition no matter what comes our way, whether it be war, economic crisis, or in this case, disease. And we will get through it, and in no small part because of compassionate and dedicated and principled secretaries of state, of course, like Steve Simon. So I'm so glad you're joining us today, Steve. For those of you who don't know, he is Minnesota's 22nd Secretary of State, and he was sworn into office in January of 2015. As Minnesota's Chief Elections Administrator, he's dedicated to protecting and defending and strengthening Minnesotans' right to vote. And thanks in no small part to his work, Minnesota consistently ranks among the very top in the nation for voter turnout. And prior to being elected Secretary of State, Steve served in the Minnesota legislature where he chaired the House Elections Committee. And Steve and his wonderful family live in Hopkins. So we're so thrilled to have you with us, Steve. Received a number of questions from constituents all throughout my district. And I'd love to just get into those right now. So we welcome you. Maybe you can start by just telling everybody, what is the role of the Secretary of State in Minnesota vis-a-vis elections?
Well, we like to say that we're in the democracy business. Here is what we don't do. We don't count any of the votes. We don't own any of the elections equipment. We don't hire or train any of the folks that you might see in the polling place. But what we do is we coordinate all those activities. We handle the policy work and the budget work at the state. We certify the election results. We report the election results on election night. We train the trainers, so to speak, when it comes to people in the polling place. We certify elections equipment, etc. But sort of in umbrella form, we oversee the system. And that's no more important than what we're about to face in a very consequential election.
Yeah, no question. So I'm getting a lot of questions from people asking, considering that voting's already started, for those who have not registered yet, but still want to participate as a registered voter in this election, how can they go about doing so?
The easiest way to do it is to do it online, and you can go to mnvotes.org. That's our website, mnvotes.org. Very easy, very simple. Or you can do it the more conventional way by filling out a paper form, which you can either download from that same website, or you can visit a city hall or a county office and obtain it that way. Very important to do. Keep in mind in terms of deadlines for registering to vote, there is a pre-election cutoff of October 13th. So before the election, you have to register by October 13th. However, Minnesota is a same day or election day voter registration state. So on election day itself, any Minnesotan who's eligible to vote can register right there on game day at the polling place.
Great. So if anybody forgot to request a mail ballot who wanted to, you can still register to vote on election day on November 3rd. That's really important for people to know. So those who did request a mail ballot and have sent them back, some have asked me, how can they determine if it was received or was it counted? Is there a mechanism to do so?
Absolutely. We have a tracker function, a ballot tracker function on that same website, mnvotes.org. The shortcut is mnvotes.org/track. And no voter who returns a ballot by mail need wonder whether it got there or hope or say a prayer that it got there. They can go there, input their information, and determine not only that it got there, but the day that it got there. That's tremendous peace of mind to the record number of voters this year, over 1 million so far, who have pledged to vote from home by mail.
Got 1 million so far. So there have been 1 million mail ballots requested. Clearly, and I've received some of these questions as well from people. People who've requested a mail ballot actually received them already, but have made the determination that they'd actually like to go vote in person. Is there any reason why they can't do that instead once they receive the ballot?
Not at all, Congressman. That is perfectly legal, and it's not uncommon. Someone orders it in the mail, they receive it, and they decide for whatever reason either to go in like now and vote in-person absentee, and if you don't know where to go, you can go to that same website, mnvotes.org, or they decide, you know what, I know I have that ballot mailed to me, but I want to go in on game day. I want to go in on election day. You can do that. Obviously, don't vote both. That's a felony. Don't do that. But you can do that. You don't need to bring in the ballot that you received at home anywhere. Just don't use it. Just destroy it, discard it, get rid of it. But you can do that. Absolutely. You can change your mind.
And does the state and does the Secretary of State's office have some type of mechanism so that if someone did do that, sent back a mail ballot and then also voted in person, is there a mechanism to flag that and discard one of the two?
Yes, no one is going to be able to vote twice. We flag that, absolutely. There's an individualized barcode that is associated with each ballot. That is, in some cases, almost instantaneously canceled. And so, no, not only do we monitor and catch anyone who would try to vote twice, we even do it across state lines. We partner up with other states to determine who is trying to vote in Minnesota, for example, and another state like South Dakota or Iowa. So we catch them all.
And speaking of other states, I think a lot of people are surprised to hear that there are about 5 U.S. states that conduct their elections right now almost entirely by mail ballot. Both Democratic states, blue states, and red states, right?
That's right. There are a handful that do it that way. And interestingly, in Minnesota, we have pockets that do it that way. We have 200,000 voters in Minnesota who live in townships or small cities of fewer than 400 registered voters who have decided, as they can under state law, to ditch their polling places where their residents vote only that way. So we have, to the tune of 200,000 people dotted across nearly every county, many Oregons and Washingtons and Colorados. Those are some of the states that do it the way you just described. So we have some experience with that on a smaller level in Minnesota, but of course, statewide, that's not the way we do it. The voter has to do something and request the ballot. And again, mnvotes.org is that website.
I see. So of course, the question that a lot of people are asking is concerns about election night itself, and will we know the results? And because so many mail ballots are being used both in Minnesota and of course around the country, should voters anticipate changes in how results are reported and perhaps delays? And how will Minnesota likely look on election night?
Yes, thank you for that. And let me start by enunciating and describing the single biggest change, I would say, this year. It's 2020 only, a one-time special kind of change, very on brand for this unconventional and difficult and challenging year. This year only, there is a law in effect, a change in effect by court order that says the deadline for getting your ballot back is more forgiving. The normal rule in a normal year was always that you had to get it back by election day, get it to your elections office by mail or by hand delivery by election day. Not this year. This year, because of COVID and by court order, the rule is it can be postmarked as late as election day, November 3rd, as long as it arrives 1 week later by Tuesday, November 10th. If it arrives on Wednesday the 11th, it's out. It won't be counted. That means every Minnesotan has an automatic 7-day cushion to get that ballot from point A to point B. Very forgiving and generous, and should provide some peace of mind. But what it also means, to your particular question, is by definition, we won't have 100% of the results in or the ballots in until a week later. A couple thoughts on that. Number one, I just want everyone to know, and spread the word if you would, that that is very much by design. When you see on election night that 100% of the results are not in, just know that that's not the result of anyone's laziness or screw up or anything like that. That is by design of the legislature and by design of the courts this year. Secondly, I would just caution this. Just because we won't have 100% of the votes in for a week doesn't mean we'll all be standing around wondering who won every office. That's not the case. And the primary last month was a good dress rehearsal for that, if you will. I strongly suspect, and I predict, that we will know a large majority of the outcomes, meaning the winners, either on election night or shortly thereafter. So we don't have to worry that we're all going to be in suspense about who won stuff. I think we'll know most of the outcomes and results well before that 1 week mark.
And Steve, tell me, at what point after ballots are received by the state are they actually counted? When does that process begin?
Yeah, so the counting, if you will, can start 14 days before the general election. So picture a mountain of mail coming in from, at this point, 1 million or more Minnesotans, and they can start being processed, meaning basically counted, 14 days before. They can be fed into machines. The result will be recorded. There will be no tally or adding up of all of those until election night, but they will be recorded or registered. The voters' choices will be noted. And that puts us in a real position of advantage. There are states in this country, including big ones like Pennsylvania, where they can't touch that mountain of mail until election day. Here in Minnesota, very wisely, we have decided this year to grant 14 days. That's a great head start and will contribute, I think, a lot towards a smooth election day and really election week.
And you mentioned that there's a little bit more of a grace period as long as you have a postmark by the election day, that up to a week later ballots can still be received. Tell me about your confidence level in the Postal Service right now and getting ballots, from the mailboxes to the delivery points.
Well, let me make a distinction between the folks in Washington running the Postal Service and the folks we've dealt with in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Am I disturbed by some of the reports in Washington about the higher ups making decisions that may have resulted in postal delays? You bet I am. Does that deter me from recommending people vote by mail this year and take a good hard look at voting from home? No, it doesn't deter me. It's full speed ahead. And I say that in part because the folks in Minnesota that our office have been dealing with have been outstanding, cooperative, flexible, creative, dedicated, and the like. We're also urging everyone on this meeting and everywhere to order the ballot now. Don't wait until late October. That's one way that we can mitigate or work around any even potential delay. So order it now at mnvotes.org, even if you think you might change your mind, even if you're not sure yet whether you know certainly that you want to vote that way. We're also telling folks that as soon as you're comfortable with your decisions on the ballot, and only you can answer when that is, it could be election day, it could be earlier, get that ballot in at that time. If you're the kind of person who knows a week out or 2 weeks out who you're going to vote for and really nothing's going to change your mind, get it in then. Also, there's the rule that we talked about. Keep in mind, you can wait until election day to mail it as long as it gets in a week later. I would also add that just because you receive a ballot by mail doesn't mean that that's the way you've got to return it. So for those on this call or elsewhere who have some anxiety about the Postal Service and the delays we've been reading about, you don't have to send it back by mail. You can always hand deliver it to your elections office, and that address will be noted in the materials that you receive. Or better yet, in most circumstances, you can have someone that you know and trust hand deliver it for you. So all in all, I would say that despite what we're hearing about the Postal Service, and it's a legitimate concern, I'm concerned, and I know you, Congressman, have been quite concerned as well, that doesn't stop me from recommending voting from home by mail as a real sensible option this year in light of the workarounds we have in Minnesota.
Yeah. And Steve, I've heard from a number of constituents that this is the first time in their lifetimes they'll be voting by mail ballot. And some have expressed concerns about hearing from others that their ballot may have been rejected during the primary because someone didn't put a signature in the right place or put it in the envelope the right way. Can you share with us a little bit about what people should be really focused on when they get that mail ballot? Are there any kind of regular problems that people face that you can maybe highlight right now so people get ballots back that are ready to go?
Absolutely. Actually, when it comes to rejection of absentee ballots, I'm really optimistic this year. And in a strange, weird way, COVID has contributed to that optimism. Let me explain. There's some changes that have been made that take off the table, basically, some of what are traditionally the key reasons for rejection. The biggest reason for rejection, typically in a typical year in Minnesota, is the absence of a witness signature. That's the #1 reason that ballots are traditionally rejected. This year, that entire issue is off the table because by court order, due to COVID, there is no witness signature requirement on absentee ballots, except if you're newly registering to vote. If you're newly registering or refreshing your registration to vote, then you do. But unless you're in that narrow category and you're already pre-registered to vote, you don't even need one. So that #1 reason typically for rejection isn't even a reason this year, it's off the table. The #2 reason for rejection is timeliness or lateness, basically. And because of that 7-day cushion, I'm confident that that number will be diminished as well. But overall to voters, I would say this year, in this special COVID year, I would say, remember that you yourself, the voter, need to sign that envelope. And remember, subject to your own tolerance for risk, to make sure that it's timely. There's a 7-day automatic cushion, but if you're not comfortable with even the 7 days, send it the Monday before, or the Saturday before, or the Friday before, or better yet, hand deliver it. Those are the 2 things that I would caution people to look at on the ballot to make sure that we diminish that rejection. And I would say this as additional peace of mind, Congressman, and that is that by law, if a ballot is rejected, the local folks who are processing that must contact the voter and give them a chance to do it right, a chance to do it again, a chance at a do-over. And that's why our rejection numbers in Minnesota are so low, and why even when you see rejection numbers reported, that isn't a reflection of number of people who couldn't vote. Those are ballots that are rejected. And in a majority of the cases, those folks are allowed to do the do-over, do it right, and vote. So the rejection number isn't a reflection of numbers of people, it's numbers of ballots.
So just to make it clear, so if someone sends in their mail ballot early, which is another good reason to do so early, so if there are some problems, there's some time to correct it, they would be notified in advance. And how could they fix that? Do they have to do it again by mail, or could they instead choose to actually go to the voting station? What's the best way to do so?
Any of the above, any legal way of casting a vote. So if someone votes by mail now, say, and in a few days hears that they did something wrong, they forgot to include their signature, for example, they can either ask to have another absentee ballot sent to them, or they can go in person to their city hall and vote. And most places in the metro area, it's in a city hall. Or they can just say, you know what, I'm not going to vote absentee at all. I'm just going to go in on election day. So there are 3 options for someone to correct whatever mistake there is and still have their vote cast and counted.
Oh, terrific. And for those who do choose to vote in person, what might they expect at the various polling stations around the state because of COVID and social distancing and disinfecting? How might things look a little different or be a little different this year?
Yeah, there will be a little bit of a different look and feel, and in a good way. And it's thanks to you, Congressman, and your colleagues who provided the funds for all of us who administer election to make the polling place safe. So we tried this in the primary, which was a great dry run or dress rehearsal, and it worked just really brilliantly. Our office paid for, with the dollars that you and your colleagues made available, we paid for and distributed to all 3,000 Minnesota polling places sufficient supplies of PPE and other items to make the polling place as clean and safe as possible. So we had in the primary and will have in the general election high-grade, almost surgical-grade masks for all election workers. We had more disposable type masks for all voters who showed up without one. We will have hand sanitizer and pumps and wipes, and we will have protocols in place, just as we did last month in the primary, having worked with the Minnesota Department of Health on them, that govern everything from social distancing to the automatic wipe down of the polling surface after it's used by voters. So we're quite confident, based on our experience so far last month, that we will have a clean, safe, and inviting place for those who choose that equally valid option of voting in person on Election Day.
Terrific. Well, you and I talk regularly about how much we love Minnesotans because of how civically engaged they are. And I've had a lot of constituents ask me if there's still a need for poll workers or support positions to ensure that the election goes smoothly. Are there opportunities for people to still help and participate and make sure everything goes well?
Yes, absolutely. And it's really crucial. In Minnesota statewide, we need 30,000 people to step up every general election and be poll workers or so-called election judges. And people have really rallied. They've answered the call to try to prevent shortages. So we feel generally good. But yes, there are pockets, including in Hennepin County, there are pockets of communities that need them. So my advice to anyone who's interested would either be to go to our website, mnvotes.org, fill out an interest form, or contact a particular city. And it need not be your city. Under state law, if you're over 18, there are no geographical restrictions. So if you live in Minnetonka and you hear they need folks in Maple Grove, you can go there if they'll have you. You can travel anywhere in the state, as a matter of fact. And remember, this is a paid position. Even the 2 hours of training online is paid. And it's a wonderful opportunity to help our democracy. And we need folks, and we'll even need kind of a reserve force, even if they technically have enough right now, just so in the case of last minute drop-offs, those communities aren't kind of left holding the bag. But I'm confident we'll get there.
Great. And last question, Steve, is the president is clearly stoking concerns about mail balloting, indicating that there's a lot of fraud associated with mail ballots, even though he, as we all know, votes by mail himself. I've heard secretaries of state all around the country, Democrats and Republicans, pushing back on that, saying that that's just not true. It's baseless. Can you share with Minnesotans, your perspective on the security of voting by mail?
Voting by mail is time tested in Minnesota. We have been doing this since before World War II. This is not new. This is not radical. And until recently, it hasn't been political in the least. So even before this election, before most of us, certainly I, had ever heard the term COVID, in 2018, it was already gaining in popularity. Already nearly a quarter of Minnesotans were voting in some form by absentee, either by mail or in person. So it stands to reason that in a climate like this, people are seeking out that very important alternative. It is secure. Not only does the intended voter need to supply personal identifying information, but there's a particular barcode associated with that ballot. And there's a signature requirement too, so that if there's a specimen on file, it can be compared to that as well. So all this talk about foreign governments, for example, being able to counterfeit ballot, that is total nonsense. It is just workable. It wouldn't happen. A lot of people would have to be in on the plot. It is a safe, time-honored, and time-tested way to vote in Minnesota. It has served us very well, and I would imagine contributes in some small part at least to us being the reigning national champs. Minnesota, let's not forget, I never hesitate to mention, in 2018 and 2016, national champs for voter turnout. That's because people have confidence in the system. They wouldn't vote in such high numbers if they didn't know that fundamentally, it's a system that is secure and has tremendous integrity.
Well, thank you so much, Steve, for your extraordinary work, and to all Minnesotans. This is a time for celebration. One of the most civically engaged states in the entire nation. I hope we come out on top and become champions again relative to participation and turnout. And grateful to you for extraordinary work during these very extraordinary times. And want to thank you for that. And want to remind everybody that voting has already begun, as you all probably already are well aware. It's going to last. Early voting, you can vote through November 2nd, the day before the election. You can vote early by mail or in person. And most importantly, as the Secretary of State said, you can find all this information out by going to mnvotes.org. Again, that's mnvotes.org, mnvotes.org. We do live in a time of misinformation and disinformation, a lot of it online. So be cautious about what you see and read online, and go to mnvotes.org to ensure the information you're getting about when you can vote, how you can vote, and where you can vote is legitimate, because this election, no matter your politics, is of great consequence We want to ensure that it goes as smoothly as possible. So thank you, everybody. Keep up your faith, keep your optimism up, and so grateful to you, Mr. Secretary, and look forward to seeing you again soon. And let's do this. Let's do it well. Let's do it securely. Let's do it safely. And let's do it together. That's the Minnesota way. Thanks, everybody.